In 50 years, when it all blows over, African historians will write about the legend that was Europe. Europe will be in smoking ruins. Any Europeans left will be African, Arab, Indians, or Chinese. The biggest disease we have is hypocrisy. We now fight a proxy war in Ukraine, fighting back surges of migrants and refugees from countries we bombed and sanctions, and the corporatists in private continue to steal with no consequences, impoverishing us yet further, flying jets and carbon offsetting, then investing in carbon credit fake industry. We could have had all peace. We could have had prosperity. Now it is far too late. To put it into context, we all know the US's biggest export is war. From the use of WMDs over Japan in World War II to illegal wars, CIA covert operations, regime changes, and punishing sanctions to impoverish workers. 7 million civilians dead, yet Washington is not guilty of war crimes. Global research is a good reference for these numbers. The list of wars that the US has been involved in illegally since 1915 is massive and unbelievable. The Great Satan was involved in just a few here. Syria 1949, Korea 1950 to 1953, Guatemala 1954, Cuba 1959, Guatemala again 1964, Indonesia 1965, Greece 1967, Argentina 1976, Chile 1970 to 1973, Cambodia 1980 to 1995, Libya 1986, Philippines 1989, Iraq 91, Kuwait 91, Iraq 92 to 96, Bosnia 95, Sudan 1998, Yugoslavia 1999, Iraq 2002 to 2003, Libya 2011, and Syria 2001 to now. However, putting this aside, the focus of this piece is Europe, or specifically Europe, the EU hegemony. Despite the chance for peace in 1989, when the wall came down, and the GDR was given up despite 28 million Soviet deaths, the price paid for our liberty and no shot fired, a reunited Germany with evil Genscher sought revenge on Yugoslavia and broke it up. The first war in Europe since World War II, with millions displaced and hundreds of thousands killed. Then NATO, despite claiming not 1 inch eastwards, lied, mopped up Warsaw Pact countries, then came to Russia's doorstep in 2022, threatening its security. This could never be tolerated, and defensive actions are not surprising from Russia. Further, the WWR, also known as the Washington-Westminster regime, is creating global NATO, or G-NATO, to attack China using Taiwan as a proxy, drawing in Australia, South Korea, and Japan. We must recall that EU-European regimes existed by mass exploitation and theft, from slavery to occupation to oil, diamond, and uranium appropriation. Now that Syria stood up to US-EU bullies with Russian and Iranian help, the events from 2012 forced the tide to be turned. African, South American, and Asian countries are ditching the US dollar, standing up for themselves and joining BRICS. Colonialism no more. EU-European politicians are not only run by Zionists, but American Zio puppets, shitting on our so-called democracies, using its war bases to attack Iraq, Libya, Yugoslavia, and Afghanistan. With the destruction of Nord Stream 2 and the shameful cowardice of Scholz and Baerbock, Germany proved to be a compliant drone, devoid of any action of its own, or any action for its own citizens, or any recognition at all. In fact, this act of terror destroyed the German economy and will cost it 1 trillion euros over 10 years. The rest of Europe will suffer as a manufacturing powerhouse pays 3 times more, at least, for its energy. Thankfully, South Stream is operational and Balkan countries, Slovakia and Hungary, still have cheap gas. It is so comforting to be able to stop at a Gazprom or Lukoil in Serbia, for example. But further wars are coming to Europe. Events in Kosovo and Metohija with Albano-fascist terrorists are rearing their head again. Serbs want revenge on Uceka, and the time is right now to destroy their terrorist shrines and take back our heritage before it is too late. UN Resolution 1244 is still valid. People forget also the situation in Cyprus, which has been occupied by Turkey since 1974, a country which now drone strikes its 20% Kurdish minority with no condemnation or acknowledgement from the West. It is still occupying parts of Syria and also siphoning off their oil. Then, although Israel is not in Europe, the massive bombing campaign unleashed now against Arab civilians will have ramifications for Jews in Europe. Palestinians and their sympathizers will rise up against fascist France, UK and Germany, who send weapons there to keep the status quo, and whose silence is bought by gold and a few shekelim, or the threat of crashing their economies by the Rothschild cabal of international banksters. Europe bows down to its Zionist masters. UK has already sent 2 warships to the Eastern Mediterranean, and we have 2 million starving children, yet no vote in Parliament, which was completely bypassed. If we witness the recent police murder of a North African youth in France, and how anger sparked over into sustained rioting, we know the people are angry of deprivation, of lies and propaganda, of poverty. We are fed up of our unelected dictators who are answerable only to WEF or pro-US or pro-Israel entities, and definitely not to us as citizens. The tide is turning and mass action will sweep Europe like a wildfire, ready to overthrow the resident bloated corporate layer. Shithole Sweden, pretending to be a great place to live, has the highest number of shootings per 100,000 citizens and regular Quran book burnings. It is a country of high costs, low wages, poverty and anti-Islam. The hideous goal of Professor Spectre to lead the Jewish diversification of Sweden 20 years ago has come to pass. Do you like it? The one country in the world with no diversity is Israel. Fakery and propaganda are rampant. We lock up journalists like Assange and try to arrest others like Snowden. One cannot express freedom of speech or opinion without fear of a jail sentence and a fine, plus cancellation. When Germany broke up in Yugoslavia in 1991 and proudly bombed it again in 1999, it was destroying an ideal. Yugoslavia was already a small EU of 24 million people, wealthy, educated, industrious, and well-connected, religiously tolerant with several languages and peoples. This was the final nail in the coffin of Europe. The side effects have just taken decades to crystallize, and they will worsen. British people have suffered significantly from not having viable politicians, from Blair to Sunak and Starmer. They cannot understand why hundreds of thousands of illegals come to our shores from Afghanistan, Pakistan, North Africa or Iraq. Yet they blame a bad Brexit or Russia or something else banal like fake climate change. UK's economy is 30% lower in real terms than at the 2008 crash, and on a downward spiral as corporatists laugh and pat their fat bellies. Further provocation by NATO smuggling weapons on grain ships to Odessa, and now a provocative Black Sea naval exercise, can only spell even more doom for Europe. Russia has a right to defend itself, and it will. The final war in Europe will be an unrecoverable catastrophe with an annihilated Germany. But America will not escape justice. With no military or economic foothold from its minions in Europe and a worthless fiat currency, it will be exposed on 4 large fronts: east and north from Russia, west from China, Russia and North Korea, and south from Mexico. It cannot hide anymore. Peace be upon the righteous, for vengeance will be awesome.